Hi, I'm Mark Sipp at Crocker Farm Auction. Our summer auction is kicked off. It runs from August 7th to August 21st. And I'm here to show you some pieces that we're selling in the sale. We have a wonderful selection of southern pottery in this auction. You can see here we have this fantastic bowl dipped in yellow slip and then decorated with copper and manganese sponging. It's Moravian. It was made in Salem, Bethabara, or possibly even at the Mount Shepherd pottery by Philip Jacob Meyer, who was excommunicated from the Moravian community and established his own pottery there. And there's very few pieces known from that site, but based on shard evidence and a surviving sugar bowl, it's very possibly his work as well. But incredible condition for a North Carolina piece of redware. I mean, you can find it occasionally, but typically it has its condition issues. This is really in remarkable shape. Also potted the Moravian tradition. We have this fantastic copper glazed fish bottle. Sweet little size. You can see you can barely fit any liquid in here. This was possibly a child's toy. You can see this distinctive beading on the mouth of the fish and this wonderful scale detail throughout. Really beautiful piece. Fresh to the market. Sweet size. Have some other very interesting southern pieces from Edgefield, a small Stony Bluff jar, as well as some Great Road pottery, Alabama pottery, this cute little salt over Albany slip churn, and a nice Tennessee pitcher with a really distinctive handle, spurred handle. We have a great selection of Alexandria pots in this sale. I'll show you a fantastic jar later, and here's some other very nice jars by H.C. Smith and John Swan. Very unusual to find these decorated. This is one of the rarest maker's mugs that we've ever handled, this H.R. Marshall jar, made in Baltimore during the early 1820s. Some interesting Maryland advertising. This extremely rare Bayless and McCarthy jar from Louisville, Kentucky, with slip-trailed banding around the top and this wonderful stenciled floral motif at the base. And you can find Bayless and McCarthy pieces, or Bayless, McCarthy and Company pieces that were made out in Western PA, but to find one that's actually made in Kentucky, in this case it was made at the J.H. Miller Pottery of Brandenburg, Kentucky, is very special. So it's a Kentucky-made piece for the Kentucky market. Fabulous color, very interesting, cute wax sealer form, very special piece. Moving along, we have a fantastic selection of Anna pottery pigs. You can see we've got a whole sty of them, and they come in a variety of sizes, molds, and inscriptions. Leading the pack is this great cartoon inscribed pig with Horace Greeley. This pig was presented to the Horace Greeley Society in Anna, and apparently Cornwall Kirkpatrick, the mayor of Anna at the time, was a supporter of Greeley. Greeley was a newspaper owner and a politician who ran for president unsuccessfully. You can see it has this classic Anna map on the back. And the front has Greeley. You can see how his arm is formed out of the pig's leg, which is just fantastic. He's kind of reaching out here at this trap. And the trap is what? The trap is the presidency. And it has his distinctive hat. He always wore these broad-brimmed hats. And the hat says, whoever says this is a trap is a liar. Wonderful piece. One of, I believe, only two that I've seen. And this particular one is believed to be the one that was actually presented by Cornwall to the Horace Greeley Society. So it's got some great historical significance for you American history buffs out there, as well as wonderful decorative appeal. We've got a couple salt glazed pigs in this auction as well, including a fantastic 1882 pig with a wonderful inscription. You can see this great Anna penmanship, really, really stylized. These looping lines and this just very fine cursive. It's actually signed by Anna Pottery and dated 1882 and has the railroad map all over it, all highlighted in cobalt. Beautiful pig. An even rarer pig with salt glaze is this pig that was fashioned with glass eyes, and the glass eyes are missing, which happens from time to time. But they would glue those in there after the piece was fired. And this has political references as well. You can see here, it says, with a little good old rye inna, and of course it's in a hog's rear end, 1882, a very healthy year for Democrats in Ohio and New York. And of course we have the map on the other side. Interestingly, both of these pigs were made in the same year, and they're both going to sell in this auction. Another rare one is this pure Big Spring whiskey pig. And this is the only one that we've ever seen like this, with this insignia, a Q within a diamond, and this particular business, which we believe was a distillery out of Kentucky. This is the largest pig that we've ever sold. Exceptionally large size mold, and hopefully this video can convey that to you all. Pure old bourbon in a hogs. And we just have a simple map on it. We have Mound City over here, and ICRR, Chicago at the mouth, and lard oil drill on the underside. But this is even larger than the Springfield hog that we sold many years ago. Very, very rare mold was used to create this. I believe this thing is something like 9 inches long. Then lastly, we have a more typical pig in Albany slip, a good example of what they produced regularly with these pigs. You see it says latest and most reliable railroad guide. This is a little unusual in that normally it says railroad and river guide. This one just says railroad guide with a little final bourbon inna, and then we have the railroad map. So really great selection of pigs, kind of runs the whole gamut of quality that they produced. Also in the sale, sort of related to Anna Pottery, is a nice selection of George Ohr pottery. George Ohr, of course, he's called the Mad Potter of Biloxi. And we have a good selection of what he produced, particularly if we're looking at these two pots. These really kind of typify his crumpled style. This vase I really like because if you hold it like this, it looks like a regular vase. I mean, there's not really all that much different about it except the crimping at the rim. But then if you look at this side, we have all this wonderful manipulation. You can see how he just poked it and dented it. And you can even see on the interior just how far he pushed that in. If you look at that interior view, it's amazing. We have this nice scalloping here. And then this side is just bare of any scalloping. Just very different, kind of like a normal side and a eccentric side, so to speak, just like some people are. On the underside, we have George Ohr's Maker's Mark, G.E. Ohr, Biloxi Miss. And this was made in the late 19th century. This is a larger vase, a little bit larger than you typically see. You can see in this case, he's actually twisted the pot when he's made it and then collapsed it, pushed it down in on itself. And this top view of this is really cool. You can actually see the twist and the collapsing on the interior. Has a beautiful copper glaze speckled throughout. George Ohr Maker's Mark on the underside. And you can see just how thin it is. It's really remarkable how thin he got his pots. That's one thing that he's well known for, and this piece really exemplifies that. We have another crumpled pot. This is a bisqueware piece, but it appears that it was coated in some kind of light slip. And again, the contortions are extreme on this example. This is actually interesting in that he's folded the rim down inward and flattened it against the sides. But then right here, he's left with this pointed protrusion at the top. Very nice footed vase. We have a great Ohr inkwell Very different with this vine and berry pattern. And that bears his maker's mark on the underside. Slightly different mark, George Ohr, Biloxi. Of course, there's a puzzle mug. He advertised these as puzzling cups at fairs. They have a big sign for them. This is one of his classic forms, and this is actually signed in his own hand, which you do see frequently, George Ohr. Beautiful glaze. And then some other interesting novelties, these banks, or these inkwells in the form of cabins in green glazes. And then this example, log cabin in yellow glaze, signed on the underside. And this piece is kind of interesting. I thought this was cute. This is one of his bisqueware pieces, it wasn't glazed, but it has these ear handles. They look almost just like human ears. And it says Expo clay. And this is when he was potting in St. Louis, around the time of the St. Louis Exposition in 1904. So very, very cool thing. Moving along, we have a great pottery related photograph, and it's fairly rare to find early American pottery depicted in 19th century images. And here's one of an African American man holding an ovoid jug. Just a great image. This was found with some Civil War photos out in Ohio, I believe. Very different thing, very cool. We have some John Bell, this fabulous large-sized butter tub. You can see this piercing around the top, very reminiscent of what John Bell's relatives were doing down in Strasbourg with animals and other things in terms of doing the piercing. And also you'll find that in some of his spaniels and things, but what you won't find it on is his butter tubs. That's unusual. Here's a nice John Bell light glazed stoneware butter crock, dated 1871. Sometimes you can match up these tulips with certain Bell pottery members, certain sons of John Bell. And this is probably based on a piece that's inscribed VC Bell. This is probably decorated by Victor Conrad Bell, who's John Bell's son. So he made it his father's pottery in 1871, and it bears his father's maker's mark, John Bell, Waynesboro. It comes with its original lid, but interestingly, while this is lead glaze, this lid is salt glaze. But it's a small size lid that fits perfectly. There's really no question that this was original to the piece. We have some nice sugar bowls. Color schemes on these and forms indicate very early, and they're possibly Hagerstown, Maryland. A classic Eberly wall pocket from Strasbourg, Virginia. Very distinctive Shenandoah Valley form. And it's using their hands with rose motif, bird and clamshell designs, that you find on their work. Have some interesting George Ohr tiles. These will be sold in a lot of 3. You can see it has stamped and incised decoration, incised Biloxi on the bottom, very cool. We also have a nice selection of Shenandoah Valley stoneware, including this extremely rare Carver and Whiteman Edinburgh pitcher. One of the rarest maker's marks from the Shenandoah Valley. You just don't see it very often. And to find it on a pitcher is really special. Here's a Hickerson pitcher, 1 gallon, with unusual floral motif. Usually don't see Hickersons decorated that well. And then here's a J. Keister pitcher with a really extravagant design for the region. You can see this floral motif, and then these sprigs coming off the sides. This is clearly an Alexandria design and was, therefore can be attributed to James Shinnick, a potter that worked in Alexandria, Virginia at the Wilk Street Pottery for Benedict C. Milburn, and then later traveled to the Shenandoah Valley to pot. But a scarce maker's mark to find on a pitcher, for sure. Here's some other interesting Valley pottery, including a rare Round Hill pottery vase bearing the early Winchester VA maker's mark and a nice copper glaze. Very cool. And those were made late. Those were made in the 1820s. early 1830s, right outside Winchester, Virginia. Moving along, another extremely rare maker's mark. You can see here also very cool looking one is this Samuel Butter Clarksburg, Virginia mark. And he was a Morgantown trained potter that established his own pottery in Clarksburg and sadly died after getting shot with his own gun. But he was a very skillful potter. There's very, very few marked examples of Samuel Butter pottery known. And in fact, according to a well-known article that was written on it in Ceramics in America, I believe they say there's something like 3 known. There may be more since that time. There's a fantastic ring jug that's one of the great examples of slip decorated West Virginia redware. It really indicates his skill as a potter. But you can see this maker's mark is really different, really interesting with this serrated edge in this circle. And this glaze is very distinctive. Really beautifully glazed piece. Moving along, we have a Thompson pottery, Morgantown flower pot with pine cones applied to it. And I'll show you a even better example later, but these were specially produced things made by David Greenland Thompson for family members or local townspeople. You can see the painstaking process of actually molding each pine cone and then applying it here. This wasn't something that you could mass produce with efficiency. So very special and very unusual piece. Here's a Rufus West pitcher from Morgantown. He potted for the Thompsons in Morgantown for a little while, and then he ended up going to West Virginia University, and they actually named an engineering award after him. But very rare to actually have a potter's signature on it from Morgantown. You just don't really see that, other than the handful of maker's marks that the Thompsons used. Here's a classic people jug. Really wonderful decoration, wide mouth spout. You see these designs used both in Morgantown as well as Uniontown, Pennsylvania, and there were certainly connections between potteries at both locations, but these are considered iconic regional ware that have been collected for a long time from the area. These simply brushed people are very, very distinctive to the region. We have a wonderful selection of West Virginia pottery overall, and you can see, we have this very rare Palatine spittoon with rose decoration and freehand striping on the interior. A rare presentation picture from Palatine that has the owner's name on it, and an 1880s date. It actually says Palatine, West Virginia on the back. Very cool. An extremely rare harvest jug. This form is obviously popular no matter who made it, but very few are known from Palatine, and this has Hardin's desirable rose stencil on the front. Classic 2-spouted form. A rainbow handle, very cool. An extremely rare 2-gallon pitcher by Ritchie and Hamilton of Palatine, and this is one of the best Palatine pitchers known. There's a chance it could be the best. You can see it's got a great 2-gallon size. Wonderful use of stenciling as well as freehand decoration. It has these great swags going all around it and even a decorated handle. Really fabulous piece. Some other great Palatine pitchers here you can see as well, including the Palatine pear on a pitcher, which you don't normally see. Palatine shield on a pitcher, which you don't see. You actually really don't see Palatine pitchers, period. They're exceptionally rare. So let's have some Jane Lou West Virginia dogs down there, as well as a lion. Moving along, we have some great small-sized Pennsylvania pieces of pottery. This large-sized Sal flask was made by Daniel or Joseph Henney in Berks County, Pennsylvania, Charlottesville. You can see it's wheel thrown like a jug. So the potter brought this thing up like a jug, let it sit for a little bit, Started fashioning the snout, applied the ears, the legs, the rear of the pig, and then he heavily incised it. All this, boar's hair, for lack of a better term, all over it with a comb-like tool. You can see how the lines are all parallel, so he's actually using some kind of comb-like device to decorate it, and then he glazed it with splash manganese and clear lead over top of that. The eyes are impressed, so these elliptical eyes with details around them. A really wonderful piece. There's one like this uses the centerfold of American Radiance, the famous book for Ralph Asmarian's collection. And this is just a fabulous example. These are very, very rare. These aren't like Anna pottery pigs where, you can find them. There's hundreds known. This is a remarkable work. There's only a handful known, and the condition is really exceptional. It has this chip here, and I think some chipping probably in the firing down here, and that's it. So we do find these are usually heavily restored. So very special piece. Interesting Pennsylvania redware tiger made during the late 19th century. Very cool piece. A fabulous Remy pottery bank, incised Walter, 1892, presentation piece. And you can see it has this wonderful finial, very unusual molded finial of a pheasant or a dove, some type of bird. But the detail of this particular finial is remarkable, and it's actually one of only two that I've seen with this particular finial on it. Typically the birds are much cruder. Of course, the bird finial banks in general by the Remys are considered one of their most desirable forms. We have a nice selection of pottery by Thomas Haig Jr. from Philadelphia. When we think of Philadelphia pottery, this is one of the great iconic forms that comes to mind. This is a redware example of their log cabin banks. You can see the slot right there in the door and the raccoon on top. In this case, the raccoon has impressed lettering, this is the only example that we've seen impressed in this manner. It says Old Coon. And you can also see the base is impressed, Philadelphia, and TH for Thomas Haig. And the underside has this fabulous signature and size, this heavy script with these looping lines, Thomas Haig Jr., May 14th, I believe, possibly May 11th, 1852. And so he made this symbol of a log cabin with a raccoon on top became associated with the Whig Party under William Henry Harrison. And these were done during the 1840s and then even after Harrison's death into the 1850s at the Haig pottery, a very distinctive form. Never seen one done by another pottery. He produced these in this redware with slip decoration, and then he also produced them in salt clay stone with cobalt, and then he produced them in this flint enamel medium, and this one's incised also Thomas Haig Jr., and it says March 18th, 1852, made the same year as that, but again, different type of clay used. It's not red clay, it's this light whitish clay, and then it has a clear glaze with copper and manganese under it. This is one of the best conditioned Haig banks I've ever seen. Typically they have a lot of condition issues. This one is in very nice shape compared to most. We have a couple oyster jars made for African American oystermen in New York City. This one was made for Thomas Downings. You can see here, it says T. Downings Pickled Oysters, number 5 Broad Street, New York. And this is the best example of a Thomas Downing oyster jar that we've ever had. We've only had, I think 2, this being the second, but this one is in fabulous color and condition. You can see just how nicely done the salt glaze is, how bright the cobalt is. He was a very important figure in the abolition movement. He's a self-made man. I came from Virginia to New York and established his own oyster house in New York, and he eventually ended up selling oysters to the Queen. Actually not selling, he gifted oysters to the Queen of England at the time. And he was a very, very well-respected man. I believe they say Wall Street closed down briefly on the day that he died, or when they held his funeral in honor of him. There's some wonderful history about him. You can see that in our write-up. Very, very fascinating story. Classic American story. This is another African-American oyster jar for Thomas M. Jackson, 47 Howard Street, New York, with an Albany slip glaze over a reddish clay. Some other nice stoneware, including this fresh tomatoes jug. Very cold, no doubt what this jug was used to hold. This inscription is very rare, and this design exceptionally rare. Wonderful piece. Great Crolius jug with 2-color decoration. This was made early on, probably about 1805. Manganese wreath around a cobalt highlighted name. You don't see that too often. Great size. Moving along, there's a William Nichols jug that he made in Athens before he went to Poughkeepsie, and the reason we know that, has his classic form, classic decoration, which resembles a turnip. But incised into that, we have initials, and this is gonna be very hard to film, but initials AH within a heart, and then the date 1818. And he did not travel to establish his Poughkeepsie pottery until after that, and then unfortunately he died, I believe in 1823, very shortly after establishing his own pottery there. So a tragic story of a young potter. I think he was only 25 years old when he died, but this was made during his Athens years. Beautiful piece. Going along with that, we have a piece of Nichols Poughkeepsie stoneware, made shortly before he died, and this is when he had actually established his own pottery. We have W. Nichols and Poughkeepsie, with that classic design that really has become synonymous with that talented young potter. A couple nice Manhattan pieces, some interesting redware, including a highly important redware bottle. You see just how big this is. This is a large size bottle. Looks like a glass onion bottle, but it's made out of redware. Has that distinctive spotting and modeling of the clay, olive to orange coloration, characteristic of a lot of New England pottery. And then this slip decoration around it, which is just fabulous. It really not only adds to its decorative value, but really helps date this piece. The use of cream-colored slip on New England redware is exceptionally rare when it comes to pieces like this. You can find your plates and things like that, but to find it on a piece of hollowware in this manner, slip trail, is very unusual, and it helps date it as well as place an origin to it in Charlestown, Massachusetts, sometime during the 18th century. So you're looking at a colonial era piece that has really great decorative appeal from a town that very little intact pieces of redware have survived. There's been some archaeological studies there that indicate this type of thing was made there. They used slip decoration actually apparently pretty frequently there based on shard evidence, but to find one intact is quite unusual. And this example was actually found recently in Vermont. So we're very excited to offer this newly discovered colonial piece. Moving along, we have a fabulous selection of Western Pennsylvania pottery, including this sweet little jar signed Tilly. Presentation piece, probably for a young girl named Matilda. Decoration indicates it was made by James Hamilton in Greensboro. Very nice tamware piece with the date, 1888. Two very nice harvest jugs, including this example by Henry Glazier with this swag decoration. Some nice Calvin pottery. You can see this example is even inscribed for its owner, Daniel Geist, 1854. Wonderful form. Really bold blue, really great piece. We have some Calvin pottery as well, including this nice battered pail. This nice shard, this will make a nice, if shadow box frame, this would really make a nice addition to somebody's wall. This was a fabulous piece in its day. And some very nice northeastern pottery you don't see very often. We have a really great rabbit and an eagle from West Troy, and this interesting advertising piece for Boston Merchant with a bird in a tree. Wonderful folk art decoration. The Boynton brothers, Jonah and Calvin Boynton, started in Albany, and then Calvin eventually went to Troy. Here's a fish by him, very unusual piece. You'll occasionally find incised fish produced earlier in their Albany years, and there's a handful of incised fish known from Calvin Boynton's Troy period, but to find one with a freehand fish is very special. This one almost looks like a goldfish, really, really appealing depiction of a fish. A very nice Paul Cushman jar with some light cobalt decoration. Extremely rare. This piece is probably unique. This is a sea hadal piece, a Union pottery jar from Newark, New Jersey. This design I've never seen on a piece of stoneware before, or any other piece of pottery for that matter. But as New Jersey stoneware from this period is typically simply decorated with flowers or leaves or birds, to find one with this actual design of two birds flanking this crest with this heart-shaped crown and flags it's really special. It's a nice Wingander pottery from the late 19th century in Haddonfield, New Jersey, and some Lanier Meadows face jugs down here as well. Moving over here, there's some of the more important pieces in the auction, including this great 4-gallon Calvin Wilcox jug that was owned by noted folk artist Bill Rank, who did theorems and other classic Pennsylvania Dutch works of art. This is great in its size, 4 gallons. The fact that it's got a bird on a cluster of grapes is just very unusual. This piece, and I'm going to bring it over to the table over here, is a really special object. The Bell family is near and dear to my heart. I think they're fabulous. What they made was remarkable, both in stoneware and redware. You can't really think of a single other potting family that produced such special things in both mediums, stoneware and redware. This is marked John Bell, and it has a 6-gallon capacity mark incised above it, as well as the date 1874 on each side. You see it has this fantastic brushed floral motif, this classic John Bell tulip design. In this case, the much rarer elongated tulips, almost like a trumpet flower kind of thing. And this vining at the top is also unusual. It's all applied over slip. So you have this really light, creamy color and this really bold cobalt. But what really makes this piece special is the inscription on the underside. And I hope this can be filmed okay. It looks like it will be. It says January the 1st, 1874, made by Solomon Bell for Tilly Bell, Waynesboro, PA. And so this piece was made by the Strasbourg potter, Solomon Bell, John Bell's brother, at his brother's shop in Waynesboro in 1874. And maybe he was visiting, John for Christmas. It was the beginning of the year, very first day of the year. And he made this jar for his niece, John Bell's daughter, Matilda Bell. And the idea that we have a piece here that combines the work of both brothers. Because when we look at John Bell and look at Solomon Bell, we think of like the two greatest Shenandoah Valley potters that ever lived. The two most important ones, arguably the two most talented ones. And so we have this great collaborative work. Solomon's visiting his family. He says, on New Year's Day, I'm gonna go make some pots. And so he makes this jar for Tilly, who actually ended up living in the Bell family homestead for her entire life. I'm sure was very active at the pottery. There's a famous watercolor known by her. Watercolor might be pastel, some sort of portraiture that she did of her father. So to have this piece survive, and we've also done some studies on it and matched the handwriting up, it's definitely in Solomon Bell's hand. The sentimentality of the piece, the family story involved with it, it's just something that you don't typically see on pieces, to have one brother make it in another brother's pottery. So to make that a combination of both John and Solomon is really special. This is the best Benedict C. Milburn jar known. You see it has Benedict C. Milburn's stamp right there. He made it at his Wilk Street Pottery in Alexandria around 1850. And the decoration is just fabulous, slip trailing throughout. Very, very high style slip trailing, chain links draped around the top, and then tulip motifs on the reverse. But you can see also the form is very special. We have this heavily tooled base, this nice tooling here, this flared collar with additional tooling, and then check out these handles. These handles are just great. These big open lug handles with depressed terminals and scalloping surrounding them. Really, really wonderful object. The cream of the crop when it comes to Milburn's jar forms. The great John Berger cooler with floral decoration. Very rare form from Rochester. You just don't see that kind of form coming out of Rochester often at all. And a great jug cooler by J&E Norton of Bennington, Vermont. Great size, 6-gallon. It's a classic flowering urn motif and unusual jug form. There's a couple of great jug coolers in the Bennington Museum. You want to take a look at them if you can get a chance. They're fabulous, but typically during this period you'll find kegs. So this form is a little more unusual for the period. A wonderful beer cooler. There's no doubt what this piece held. It's got beer written on the front and on the back. Somebody actually wrote pop on it and erased that in cobalt slip. Apparently they were thinking of making a pop cooler, but instead they decided to make a beer cooler. But the slip trailing on this is just off the charts. You can see it has these flowering urns going all around it and cascading down the sides in the classic Baltimore style. Definitely a Baltimore decoration, but the clay color, the dark clay color, and the spout indicate it was probably made somewhere else. So this could have been made at a lot of places, but the artistic quality of it is undeniable. We have some wonderful Dave jars in this sale. You can see right here, here's a 2-gallon, there's a 4-gallon 2-handle jug by Dave. And if you can get in, you can get the signature and the date. You can see just how large that signature and that date and the LM are, how deeply inscribed they are. This is a very, very rare, very important form for Dave. He produced very few double-handled jugs, at least very few have survived. Typically when you find Dave jugs, whether they have one handle or two handles, they're gonna have some damage at the spout, or they're gonna have some damage on one or both of the handles. And there's only a small number of these listed in the survey of signed or dated Dave pots in the Goldberg-Witkowski article from Ceramics in America that documented a number of Dave's works. It's called Beneath This Magic Touch. You should really, if you're interested in Dave, read that article. It's a fascinating article, and it really gives you an idea of the kind of body of work that he made. You can see right here on the back, we have a classic Dave attribute this horseshoe and slash mark, as well as 4 punctates. The form of this is just fantastic, very sculptural. If you're talking any Edgefield maker, whether it's Thomas Chandler, whether it's something made at the Colin Rhodes Pottery or anywhere else, double-handled jugs are one of the premier forms, and you just don't find them from Dave. So this is a very, very outstanding, important example. The glaze is remarkable as well. You see this nice light green, high gloss alkaline glaze. Even has these wonderful runs across the top, which suggests this was double dipped or possibly poured some more glaze over the top. Really robust form, fabulous piece. Another great Dave jug that we have is this one. Nice large date, August 17th, 1852. Again, the large hand incised signature of Dave right here. And the initials LM at the shoulder for Lewis Miles. The pottery that this was made at, it was made at Lewis Miles Stony Bluff Manufactory in Edgefield. And then we also have a horseshoe and slash and 3 punctates. And you can see the glaze on this is fabulous. You can see the fingerprints here from where this was held when it was dipped. And these great glaze runs around the base. This survives in immaculate condition, and it's really remarkable. It just has this chip right here. For jugs, as I said before, his jugs very often lost their spouts. He made these very fine, thin spouts, and they just didn't survive. And the handles, of course, are pretty thin and delicate as well. So you just don't find them surviving in this kind of shape. So we're very excited to offer these two. This piece, additionally, a very rare example of Dave's work in that he used rutile to decorate it. So this rutile, this titanium dioxide, is something that you find as a colorant in white paint. Blue and white coloration on this pot. You can find it from other potteries, but it's generally not an Edgefield decorative trait, and Dave very rarely used it. We had a fantastic jug in our last sale that had a really exceptional application of rutile on it. But this example is dated February 2nd, 1852. And then it has Lewis Miles' initials on the reverse, which is also unusual. Typically you'll find these inscriptions on the same side, but the fact that this is on 2 different sides is unusual, and then 6 punctates for 6 gallons. Moving along. We have some more Dave pottery. A nice jug, incised LM with 2 slash marks and 2 punctates. And interesting throw lines on it as well. A Dave jar with LM and another distinctive Dave tray that's incised X. He also did that on his pots frequently. And this great large-sized Dave jug, signed LM. You can see it's actually LM upside down, with a horseshoe and 3 punctates, although this is actually 4 gallons, not 3 gallons. And this has really striking glaze. You can see it has some damage here, but these runs are really expressive. They're really fabulous. Particularly if you take a few steps back, it's a really strikingly glazed example. We also have a piece here by David Jarber, a free black potter at Alexander's Wilk Street Pottery, and you'll find pieces incised with his D on the underside. But this piece is very special in that it has a letter next to it. You can see the J right here, DJ, his first and last initials. Typically you just find it with just the D. This is the only one that I've ever seen that had a J after it. And it's marked Hugh Smith and Company for Merchant Hugh Smith. This is a great example of Chandler pottery, made slightly earlier than most of his pieces. Really wonderful form. You can see if you follow this kind of progression of pieces that he made these 2 a little bit later. You can see this one's a little more ovoid. The top was designed to hold a lid. The decoration's a little more elaborate. This was made when he was working with Reverend John Trapp at a pottery that only lasted a very few years in the late 1840s. And you can see just how wonderful the decoration is on this. Look at that glaze, that kind of mustard color glaze with the iron slip. And And this one has his more typical celadon, as does this. This one with iron slip, this one with kaolin slip, and then this one bears the stamp Chandler Maker. This is a great piece of Lucius Jordan pottery. You don't find too many side examples of Lucius Jordan pottery. He was a mixed race African-American potter from Washington County, Georgia, and this piece bears his J. He potted in the 1850s and 60s, and those incised initials are indicative of his work. But moving along over here, we have some other great figural decorated pieces from New York State, New England, Ohio, and even Canada. This incised Canadian jug is really remarkable. This is a special thing. You just don't see figural designs like this very often at all from Canada. It was made at the Figural pottery there. And to have one incised is very unusual as well. They didn't really do incising up there, so very cool. This example you can see is a classic N.A. White and Son Utica panel-tail bird with the potter's stamp actually done hand incised. So typically you'll see that stamped on it. In this case, it's actually hand incised, which is very unusual. Moving into the middle room, I have a wonderful Anna Pottery Temperance jug. You see it has this head form finial, really nicely carved, man with a goatee. And look at this thing, look at the, just the workmanship, the incising, as well as the use of applied molded designs and the use of hand model designs. So they're kind of a whole lot of different techniques going on here. Very, as I described in the catalog, a very tactile piece. You can just feel all the different textures. It's really a special thing. This Daniel in the Lion's Den motif is a classic design used by the Bennett Pottery in Baltimore, as well as the Bells in Strasburg, Virginia, and in Waynesboro. And somehow it made its way to him, made its way to them, Wallace and Cornwall Kirkpatrick. Classic Anna form, classic use of snakes, symbolic of the evils of liquor, but with some bizarre designs. I mean, some of them you can kind of relate to maybe the vices of humanity. This is kind of the lore of the siren with her harp. Here's a man drinking and smoking, maybe also related to, you know, the things that we get caught up in. But this is Diana the Huntress with her stag, so it's just a classical theme. We can't really relate that to anything, but we see the typical use of tortured or terrified men that are trapped inside the jug by the evils of alcohol consumption. Just a great piece, and based on the style, we date this piece very early. I mean, this is circa 1865. This is roughly Civil War era for their Temperance jugs. This is a recently surfaced work that was bought back in the 80s, and we're very excited to offer in this sale. Here's a Morgantown flower pot pine cone decoration. This is the more elaborate example that I was talking about earlier. You can see it's wheel thrown, and then all these pine cones are applied all over it in kind of an ordered, linear fashion. This is one of my favorite pieces in the entire auction, and what I think of one of the greatest face vessels that we've ever offered. This one depicts an African-American man with great realism. You can see this fabulous stepped base harvest jug form with a spout sticking out of the top. Made in the northeastern US or possibly in the Midwest, but much earlier than most vase vessels. You know, there's certainly a chance that this piece was made pre-1850. Coated in an Albany slip glaze and decorated with coleslaw hair, extruded through burlap or screen or something of that sort. But you can see just how wonderful this representation is of the human face, these lamb chop sideburns and this hair, this fantastic hair. Here's a J.S. Nash jar from Marion County, Texas, bearing the stamp J.S. Nash for Jefferson S. Nash, who also owned an iron furnace. And the glaze is very close to that found on the work of Milligan Frazier, who was an African-American potter that later established a pottery there. And so there's a lot of different theories about if he worked at Nash's Pottery, how long he worked there, which pieces he exactly made. We know there is an association between Fraser and Nash. It just hasn't been fleshed out yet, but very few pieces are known bearing Nash's mark, and this example is exceptionally glazed. You can see this wonderful drippy glaze that kind of changes color as you turn it around. This piece was recently found in the Midwest. Here's a great piece of cobalt decorated stoneware that you don't see very often from North Carolina. They did very little cobalt decoration there. When you do find it, it's usually by a member of the Craven family, and that's what this piece was. That's who made this piece. This is Thomas Wesley Craven. He made this piece in 1854, as you can see by this large date. Again, not only is heavy use of cobalt rare, but to have a date on a piece like this large is very unusual. You just didn't see big brush dates on North Carolina stoneware as you might see it on pieces, say, made in Fort Edward, New York, or somewhere up north. The eagle's fantastic. That's another Craven family stamp that they used on some of their better works. And then we have this wavy line decoration as well. Great large size jar, 5 gallons with a lot of blue. Really nice salt runs here, reminiscent of Solomon Lloyd's work. T.W. Craven died in his 20s, so there's not that much work known from him. This is certainly one of the best examples known that he made. Moving along, there's some classic New York State pottery, headlined by this urn. This urn is a masterwork of form and decoration. You can see just how large it is. I mean, it's huge. And just how elaborately done it is. This was obviously done by a very, very highly skilled potter at the New York Stoneware Company Pottery in Fort Edward, New York, about 1875. This top, so this separates. We have a pedestal on the top, but this whole top you can see was actually thrown in 2 sections. They produced this bulbous bottom part, and then they attached this flared top to it. They made that, applied these wonderful ring handles. Look at these handles. Can you get in and get a close-up of these handles? These handles are really remarkable. You see just how big they are. And then they decorated it. Classic New York Stoneware Company designs going around. We have a chicken on this side, a chicken on the front, then moving along, a bird, and then I believe there's something, yes, another bird on the back. That's what I thought. But this was thrown, joined, decorated, and fired. And then before it was fired, it was incised with 4 slash marks on the bottom. And then this base was thrown and fired and incised with 4 slash marks. And you can see on the interior, if you were to take these 2 sections apart, it has corresponding 4s on this part and this part, indicating they were made for each other. And it's just a fabulous work. This laurel wreath decoration around the bottom is really remarkable. These leaves around here are fantastic. To find a piece of gardenware, outdoor decoration of this size made in stoneware, it's just remarkable. The fact that it even survived is remarkable. The fact that they even bothered making it is remarkable. They put a lot of work into this. There's no doubt made for something special, whether displayed on the side of their pottery or for a special person in Fort Edward, New York. There's probably 4 made because they have 4 slashes, but this is the only one like this that we've seen. It really is one of the great masterworks of American stoneware made for outdoor use. We also have a classic McCoy piece with a woman feeding chickens. Wonderful, very elaborate designs. You can see there's this sense of motion and excitement as all these birds are coming in to get fed. We have a jockey riding a horse by C.W. Braun of Buffalo. There's only a handful of horses known from Braun, and this is the only example that I've seen that's actually being ridden by a jockey. You can see his cap here, and he's got a little pointed mustache. Wonderful folk art design. Moving along, we have a great selection of Western Pennsylvania and West Virginia stoneware. A lot of it I showed you in the case, but you can see here we have a pedestal cooler by James Hamilton, the premier form from that region, one of the rarest forms and certainly the most decorative form. It has nice stenciling on the front and reverse. A rare Excelsior Works Isaac Hewitt Rice's Landing double-handled jug. An unsigned Hamilton jug cooler, great 10-gallon size with bold freehand decoration. A fabulous Palatine pottery bowl. If you look at this bowl, this is Palatine, West Virginia. They very, very rarely did freehand decoration of this quality. This is in the Western PA style, but they very rarely did designs like this there. You can see great large size, elegant potting, rounded size, coved base, and then the underside even has this slight recession to it. This is one of the best pieces of Palatine pottery that we've ever offered. Very, very, very different piece. The piece decorated with a church made at the Colvin Pottery in Jane Lou, West Virginia. And we've matched this design up with fairly closely with a picture of a church that Seymour Colvin, the potter, attended and was actually very involved in. You can see the little preacher here welcoming people in. Rare Palatine harvest jug, rare E. Fowler Beaver PA double-handled jug. You just don't see that form from Beaver very often. Rare Western PA advertising, fabulous Boyers and Hardin Palatine piece with this very distinctive sine wave binding going around the top. We get a little kind of pan around the room here. Okay. We'll come in here. Some more great Western Pennsylvania and West Virginia pottery, including the 16-gallon Palatine jar, the largest Palatine jar that we're aware of. And the fact that it's impressed with the 16 is very unusual. Typically, they did their capacity marks in freehand, so it's a really special thing. A Beaver PA keg cooler, really rare NJ Lloyd Beaver PA 8-gallon jar, exceptionally rare mark. A Uniontown, Pennsylvania water cooler, very rare form for that region with their classic floral motif. More Western PA pottery. You can see here this great 20-gallon and this very rare, just don't see these much anymore, A.P. Donahoe Fredericktown piece. It's not signed, but it's classic Fredericktown work by A.P. Donahoe before he established his Parkersburg shop. This is a very special example of Morgantown, West Virginia stoneware. I showed you the Rufus West that was hand inscribed. This is what you will see when you do find a signed piece of Morgantown stoneware, and this mark in its own right is very rare. D.G. Thompson for David Greenland Thompson, Morgantown. It's a distinctive 10-gallon capacity mark, and it uses sponged and brushed elements to the design. And the fact that they're in these medallions is just very, very rare, very different. Wonderful piece. This dog, so I showed you this Fredericktown jar by A.P. Donahoe. This was made at the Donahoe Pottery in Parkersburg, West Virginia, when his son was involved. This is much later, 1890s. And this is one of the great dog sculptures I think that we've ever handled. I mean, you can see he's got his tongue hanging out. He's got an open mouth. His ears are perked. The size is great. There's a few spaniels known by Donahoe. There might even be a couple lions. The fact that this is a hand-modeled dog, this isn't molded, it's actually just all hand-done. Heavily incised, large-sized sculpture with this distinctive glaze. It's a really special thing. You can see they've used Bristol slip on the top, and then they've done cobalt abstract brushwork on the top, and then Albany slip on the sides and the underside, and then mixed in here with the Bristol. And that trait, that blue, brown, and white decoration in this manner, the way that it's applied, totally relates to what was being done at the Donahoe Pottery during the 1890s. So there's little doubt that that's where this was made, but this is a very special individual effort, one-off piece, no doubt made as something special. This is a great piece of Shinston stoneware, and you can see it actually has an impressed maker's mark, which you just don't typically associate with a Shinston produced stoneware. It says Knox and Bro Potters, which is also really special. It says Potters in the mark, very different. Shinston, West Virginia, within this kind of tombstone shaped border. Decorated in the Western Pennsylvania style. Moving along, we have some more pottery on these shelves. Very interesting things, a lot of birds, some Remy Philadelphia. We have this very nice selection of chick waterers. How many times have you seen 5 chick waterers in descending order like this? It would take a long time to amass that set individually. Right here we have a classic Shenandoah form, which was made at the J. Everly and Company Pottery in Strasburg, Virginia, about 1890. Pitcher and bowl set in their, what they would call fancy ware, what we call nowadays as collectors and dealers, multi-glaze or polychrome glaze. This is a very different and special Everly urn. The fact that we have a piece of outdoor gardenware of this size with a glaze on it, and the glaze did not get incredibly damaged, is noteworthy. Typically, if you leave something like this outside, it would get damaged in a matter of years. And of course, there's these wonderful, what they refer to as Indian necklace, floral designs, and tulips, characteristics of Everly pottery. Great piece. Most pieces of this size produced by the Bells and Everlys are slip washed, just dipped in a white slip without any lead glazing. The fact this is lead glazed is special. Great Crolius jug, made several hundred miles north of this piece out of stoneware, and also made almost 100 years earlier by Clarkson, at the Clarkson Crolius pottery. Nice Ohio bird, 6 gallon. We have one of the most distinctive American stoneware designs here. J&E Norton reclining deer jug, great condition, crisp cobalt, no blur to it at all. Has a nice spotted design and a turned head, fences and trees. Very distinctive design from that pottery. Another great decoration from Norton, double pheasant on a 4 gallon churn. Made much earlier, 50 more years earlier, is this great Manhattan jar with this abstract and size decoration. Different than you typically see from Manhattan, very different, and the size is wonderful too. It's a really large size jar. Then last but not least, we have a piece by Michael and Theophilus Miller of Newport, Pennsylvania, about 1870. Extensive floral decoration throughout. On their better pieces, they were very big on just heaping the cobalt on in large amounts. So you see these large fan-shaped foliate devices and these large tulips that just kind of dominate the front of the jug. Very nice example. Thank you so much for joining us. I hope you sat through all that. If you did, you get a round of applause. Our sale, as I said, runs from the 7th through the 21st of August. There's a special callback session on Saturday for leading bidders. After that, if you have any questions, you can go to our website, crockerfarm.com, or call us at 410-472-2016. Thank you very much.